Can't even buy a car, my brother mocked. Seconds later, a helicopter landed in the yard. My ride's here, I said. Mom nearly collapsed. I grew up in a house where comparison was a daily sport. It didn't matter what I did. If my brother managed something even half decent, it instantly outshined me. He was the golden child, the one who could fail upward and still get praised. I was the quiet one, the invisible background character who somehow always ended up as the punchline at family dinners. At first, I told myself it was just sibling rivalry. That's what people always said, right? Brothers tease each other, don't take it so seriously. But when the teasing never stopped, when it turned into my parents nodding along and laughing at my expense, it didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like my own family was taking bets on how little I could achieve. Money was the easiest target. I didn't drive a new car, I didn't flaunt expensive clothes, and I didn't chase flashy careers that made for good small talk at parties. My brother worked in sales, so every time we gathered, he would brag about closing deals, about his commissions, about the new gadgets he bought. And then the spotlight would swing to me, and the room would go quiet, waiting for me to stutter through some excuse about why I hadn't caught up. The truth was, I had been working on something. Not in the way they expected. No fancy suit, no shiny office building, no boss to brag about. My work lived mostly on a laptop screen, long hours that looked like wasting time to anyone who didn't understand. While my family assumed I was stuck, I was quietly building. I didn't say much, because what was the point? The moment I mentioned my project, they dismissed it as another phase. Still, the silence ate at me. Every cutting remark from my brother landed deeper than I wanted to admit. Still can't afford a decent car? How's unemployment treating you? At least you don't have responsibilities. Must be nice living like a teenager at 30. My parents rarely corrected him. If anything, my mom would sigh and say she just hoped I'd find some stability soon. The worst part? I believed them for a while. There were nights I sat staring at my screen, wondering if maybe I really was just spinning my wheels. If maybe the little I'd built meant nothing outside my own head. But then I'd look at the progress, the late nights coding, the emails from early clients, the slow but steady growth of something real, and I'd think, just wait. One day they'll see. I didn't expect that one day to arrive so suddenly or so dramatically. I thought the payoff would be quiet. A moment where I could finally prove myself in subtle ways, maybe through a new place to live, maybe through showing them the numbers. But the way it actually happened? Let's just say no one at that dinner table would ever forget it. Because the night everything changed started like any other family gathering, full of the same jokes, the same dismissive tone, the same unspoken hierarchy. And I walked in thinking I'd survive it like usual. I had no idea how quickly the balance of power was about to flip. Family dinners in our house always had a script. The table would be set with Mom's heavy dishes. Dad would pour wine like we were celebrating something, and my brother would slide into the seat across from me, smirking before the first plate was even passed. I already knew what was coming. It always did. At first, the conversation circled around him, his sales job, his big clients, the new shoes he bought. He spoke with that confident rhythm that made people nod along, even if half of it was exaggerated. My parents asked him questions, proud smiles on their faces, like they were watching their star athlete recount a winning game. Then, as always, the spotlight turned. My brother leaned back, stretched out like he owned the room, and casually tossed out, "So, still taking the bus these days? Or did you finally save up for that miracle car?" The words stung even though I'd heard them 100 times before. Mom chuckled behind her glass. Dad shook his head as if I were a stubborn child refusing to grow up. They didn't even realize how cruel it sounded. Or maybe they did, and just didn't care. I forced a smile, the one I'd perfected over the years. The one that said, "I don't care," even though my chest tightened every time they did this. My fork hovered over the food, and I tried to remind myself I had nothing to prove to them. Not here. Not at this table. But my brother wasn't finished. He never was. "Man, can't even buy a car. What's next? You'll ask Mom to drive you to a date." He laughed at his own joke, slapping the table like it was the cleverest thing he'd ever said. My dad joined in, shaking his head in mock disappointment. I stared at the plate in front of me, the steam rising from the food blurring my vision. There was a part of me that wanted to snap back, to throw the truth in their faces right then, to tell them that while they were busy mocking me, I had been quietly building something that made their paychecks look like spare change. But years of conditioning held me back. They expected silence. They expected me to swallow it, just like always. And then it happened. At first, it was faint, a low rumble that made the glasses on the table tremble. My dad frowned, looking toward the window. My mom set her fork down, confused. The sound grew louder, a heavy chopping rhythm that vibrated through the walls. My brother stopped mid-laugh, his expression twisting into uncertainty. I knew that sound. I'd heard it before, during late nights at the airfield. But hearing it here, now, in the middle of my family's laughter, it was like fate had chosen this exact moment to intervene. The dishes rattled. Curtains shifted in the breeze of something massive descending outside. My brother rose to his feet, trying to peer out the window, but the blades were too close, the roar too overwhelming. "What the hell is that?" my dad shouted over the noise. I sat there, heart pounding, but this time not from shame. I set my fork down slowly, calmly. And for the first time in years, I let myself smile. Because I knew exactly what was landing in our yard. And as the sound shook the house, I realized this was the moment I'd been waiting for. The noise outside hit a peak, rattling every glass and picture frame in the house. My mom actually covered her ears and half screamed, "Is that a helicopter?" As if saying it out loud might make it less real. My dad pushed his chair back and stumbled toward the window, pulling the curtain just enough to glimpse the chaos of wind and motion outside. His face went pale. My brother, always the loudest voice in the room, suddenly had nothing to say. He stood frozen with his hands still gripping the back of his chair, eyes darting toward me like I must have known something he didn't. The plates on the table vibrated from the downwash. A napkin lifted into the air like it had a life of its own. And then, suddenly, it stopped. The sound softened into a steady hum. The house held its breath. I pushed my chair back deliberately, the scrape of wood against tile cutting through the silence. For once, every eye at that table was on me. I walked slowly to the door, my heart steady, not racing like it usually did in these moments of confrontation. When I opened it, a rush of cool air swept in along with the faint smell of jet fuel. Parked right there in the yard, its blades still spinning lazily, was a sleek black helicopter. My mom gasped. My dad muttered something under his breath I couldn't catch. My brother finally managed to find his voice. What the hell is that doing here?" I turned back to the table, rested my hand casually on the doorframe, and said the words that had been sitting on my tongue for years. "My ride's here." You could have heard a pin drop. Mom nearly dropped her wine glass. My dad's mouth opened, then shut, like he wanted to demand answers but couldn't even form the first word. And my brother, Mr. Confidence, Mr. Always on top, looked like someone had just pulled the rug out from under him in front of a crowd. His face was red, not from laughter this time, but from something closer to panic. Wait, hold on," he stammered. "This is some kind of joke, right? You rented that thing? For attention." I didn't bother answering him. I stepped fully outside, letting the wind whip around me, and motioned casually at the pilot, who gave me a thumbs up through the glass. The sight of that tiny gesture seemed to unnerve my family even more. Mom followed me onto the porch, her voice sharp and trembling. "Please tell me you didn't spend money on this. Tell me this is someone else's. Tell me you're not." "It's mine," I said simply. The words landed heavier than the helicopter itself. My brother laughed, but it was a hollow, brittle sound. "No way. No freaking way. You can't even." He stopped himself, probably realizing the words he'd used minutes before suddenly didn't hold up. My dad stepped forward, his voice low and suspicious. "How? Exactly. Could you afford that?" I met his eyes. For years, I'd been the one breaking eye contact first. But not this time. "You'll find out soon enough," I told him. Inside, the plates of food were going cold, but nobody cared. The family that once treated me like I was invisible now couldn't look away. They thought it had to be a stunt. They had no idea what I'd really been building all this time. My brother's laughter sputtered out almost as quickly as it began, leaving a raw silence in its wake. He was searching my face for a crack, some giveaway that this was an elaborate prank, but there wasn't one. I just stood there calmly, letting the weight of the moment sink in. "Stop messing around," he finally said, his tone more like a plea than a joke. "Nobody just owns a helicopter." "You're right," I replied evenly. "Not nobody, just not you." The look on his face was priceless, confusion shading into anger, anger melting into something uglier, fear. For the first time in my life, he wasn't sure of his place in the hierarchy we'd all grown up with. I could see my mom's lips trembling, like she was about to scold me, but the words never came. My dad still hadn't moved from the doorway, eyes narrowing, mind churning to fit this new reality into the box he'd built for me. And I knew exactly what they were all thinking. It's impossible. He never had the money. He never had the brains. He never had the drive. But they were wrong. They had always been wrong. So I told them. Not everything. Not the details that belonged only to me, but enough. Enough to make them understand. I explained how years ago, while my brother was burning through paychecks and bragging about leased cars, I was working nights. At first it was just me and an old laptop, living off instant noodles and cheap coffee, teaching myself skills no one thought I needed. I started freelancing, building websites, fixing systems no one else wanted to touch. They thought I was playing around. What I was really doing was laying bricks, one after another, for something bigger. Then I told them about the startup I'd co-founded with 2 partners. How we worked from a spare bedroom with no AC in the summer, surviving off secondhand furniture and borrowed Wi-Fi. How the first year nearly broke us. How I almost quit more times than I could count. But I didn't. I kept coding, kept pitching, kept believing in something they couldn't even imagine. You were laughing at me back then too. I reminded them quietly. Remember? Get a real job. Stop wasting your time. You thought I was just hiding from the real world. I wasn't hiding. I was building. The room was dead silent, except for the steady thrum of blades outside. My mom's eyes darted nervously, searching for a hole in my story. My brother scoffed, but there was no conviction in it. So what, he muttered. You're saying this thing outside is proof. I nodded once. Proof enough. I didn't rent it. I didn't borrow it. I bought it. The words came out sharper than I intended, like a blade slicing clean through years of ridicule. For a second, I thought my mom might faint. She clutched the back of a chair, knuckles white. My dad muttered, "That's not possible," under his breath, as if denial could rewind the last 10 minutes. My brother, though, he couldn't stand it. His face flushed crimson, his voice cracking as he tried to reassert control. Bullshit. You couldn't afford a decent phone last time I checked. How are we supposed to believe you just, became rich overnight? Overnight, I repeated, shaking my head. You think overnight looks like years of staying up until 4 in the morning? You think overnight looks like taking on every rejection, every failure, every moment of doubt, and still pushing through? Nothing about this was overnight. I hadn't planned on saying so much. For years, I'd hidden the truth, partly out of caution, partly because I didn't think they deserved to know. But standing there, in that kitchen where I'd swallowed so many insults, I realized I wasn't speaking just for them. I was speaking for me. And then I dropped the final blow, the one sentence that made my brother's knees almost buckle. I didn't just buy a car. I bought the sky. He blinked at me, uncomprehending. I own it, I clarified. The helicopter. It's mine. Paid in full. Silence. The kind that crackles, the kind that feels alive. My mom's jaw worked soundlessly. My dad gripped the window frame like he needed it to keep his balance. And my brother? He sat down slowly, staring at me like I'd just spoken in a language he couldn't understand. For once in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt like the ground had shifted, and they were the ones struggling to keep up. And their faces told me they finally realized I wasn't joking. The silence didn't last long. It never did in my family. My mom was the first to recover, though her voice shook as she spoke. This doesn't make sense. There's no way. People don't just suddenly own helicopters. You must be mixed up in something. Something. The way she said it made my skin crawl. She didn't mean something good. My dad finally turned from the window, his jaw set, his eyes narrowed. Tell me straight, he said, pointing a finger at me like I was already on trial. Is this drug money? Gambling? Some kind of scam? I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. After years of dismissing me as useless, the only explanation they could imagine for my success was crime. Not hard work. Not vision. Not sacrifice. Just dirt. My brother seized on the idea instantly, relief flickering across his face. Yeah, he said, his voice growing louder, more confident again. That has to be it. You're not smart enough to pull this off legit. What did you do? Hack some bank? Get involved with some shady guys online? That's it, isn't it? Every word hit harder than the last. Not because they doubted me. I expected that. but because I realized they'd prefer to believe I was a criminal than admit I'd surpassed them. The thought twisted my stomach. I said flatly. That's all. I worked harder than you'll ever understand. My mom shook her head, refusing to let the idea settle. People don't work their way to helicopters. That's not normal. Neither is mocking your own son for years. I shot back. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't regret them. My brother leaned forward, eyes gleaming with a kind of desperate cruelty. So what happens when the IRS knocks on your door? Or the cops? What then? You think you're going to sit there and laugh at us when they haul you away? The room grew colder, though maybe that was just me finally seeing it clearly. No matter what I said, they weren't going to believe. Not really. Not fully. I could have laid it all out right then. Bank statements, contracts, tax filings, the endless trail of legitimate proof. But I didn't. Not yet. They weren't owed that kind of validation, not after everything. Instead, I looked directly at my dad. You want to know what's illegal? I asked quietly. Dismissing your kid's entire life because it doesn't fit your idea of success. Telling me for years I'd never amount to anything. That kind of neglect should be criminal. My mom gasped like I'd cursed in church. My brother barked a laugh, but it sounded hollow. For the first time, I wasn't defensive. I wasn't shrinking into my chair or swallowing the words that burned my tongue. I let the silence stretch, let them sit with the discomfort of my truth. And then my brother, never one to leave silence unbroken, sneered. Fine. If you're so legit, prove it. Show us. Show us the money. I could feel the challenge hanging in the air like smoke. He thought he'd cornered me, pushed me back into a place where I'd falter and look small again. But this time he was wrong, because the real shock came when my brother made his next move. That night, long after the helicopter had lifted back into the sky and the noise of its blades faded into nothing, I sat alone in my apartment staring at my laptop screen. The glow of the monitor reflected off half-finished coffee cups and stacks of notes, the same clutter that had fueled me for years. My brother's words echoed in my head like poison. Show us the money. Prove it. Part of me wanted to slam open every file I had. Tax records, legal contracts, bank statements with numbers that would shut them up forever. I pictured walking into the next family dinner with a folder so thick it would silence even him. A dramatic mic drop. But another part of me hesitated. Why should I? Why should I hand over the very proof of everything I'd built to people who spent years mocking me, doubting me, dragging me through the mud? Did they deserve to see the details of my victory? I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking under my weight, and closed my eyes. Memories came rushing in. My brother pocketing my allowance when we were kids, him taking credit for my ideas in front of our parents, the way he'd smirk when I tried to stand up for myself. He had stolen from me before. He had turned me into the family punchline. And now, he thought he could corner me again. Demand receipts like I owed him something. The truth was, I didn't owe them a damn thing. Still, a small voice whispered in the back of my mind. If you don't show them, they'll never stop spinning their version. They'll tell everyone it's fake, that you're a fraud. And people will believe them, just like they always have. I opened my eyes and stared at the numbers glowing on my screen. Proof of years of grinding, of sacrifice, of nights when I almost gave up. I exhaled slowly. Maybe I didn't know them the truth, but I owed it to myself not to let him twist this moment into another humiliation. I spent sleepless nights planning. Finally, I knew what I had to do. The next family gathering wasn't planned, at least not by me. My mom called the day after, her voice sharp, demanding, "You need to come over. We need to talk. All of us." It didn't sound like an invitation. It sounded like a summons. I thought about refusing. Part of me wanted to let them stew in their own doubts forever. But another part, the part that had stayed awake half the night replaying my brother's sneer, knew this was the chance. This was where the story turned. When I walked into their house, the atmosphere was already tense. My brother sat at the table with a smug, almost triumphant look, as if he expected to win before the fight even started. My dad had papers spread out in front of him, printouts from Google searches about helicopter costs, shady companies, fraud cases. He thought he was ready to corner me. I didn't say a word. I set my own folder down on the table. Clean, crisp, organized. My brother laughed. "What's this? A PowerPoint? You gonna pitch us like investors?" I ignored him. One by one, I laid out the documents. The business registration with my name on it, contracts with companies they'd recognize, tax returns stamped and filed, bank statements showing numbers that made their jaws tighten. "This is fake," my brother snapped instantly, his voice too loud, too desperate. "You can print anything on a computer these days. It doesn't mean." "Then explain this." I cut him off. I slid one final paper across the table. His face drained of color the moment he saw it. It was an old registration record, the kind most people wouldn't even think to keep. But I had. Because years ago, he'd stolen from me. "You remember when you tried to launch that little side business?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "You used my work, my code, my name. You filed under my ID because you thought I'd never find out." My dad frowned, pulling the paper closer. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. My brother's jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. "You stole from me," I continued. And I let it slide, because back then I thought it wasn't worth the fight. But I never forgot. The room was electric with tension. My brother shifted in his seat, muttering curses under his breath. His confidence was slipping, and he knew it. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. "So when you demand I prove myself? When you insist I show you the money? Congratulations. You just reminded me of the exact moment I decided I'd never let you take from me again." My mom finally spoke, her voice brittle. We didn't know." "That's the point," I said quietly. "You never wanted to know." For the first time in years, I wasn't on the defensive. I wasn't scrambling to justify myself. I had the facts, the receipts, and most importantly, I had control. I thought it was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. For a long moment, no one spoke. My folder of documents sat open on the table like a weapon that had already gone off. My brother's face was a storm of red and white, his jaw working, but no words coming out. Then my mom cleared her throat, her voice breaking the tension. "Enough," she said softly, almost pleading. "We're family. We shouldn't be fighting like this. What's done is done. Let's just put this behind us." Her eyes flicked between me and my brother, searching for some thread of peace to tie the evening back together. My dad nodded stiffly, though the suspicion in his eyes hadn't faded. "Your mother's right. What matters is that you're successful now. That's good. That's what we always wanted for you." The hypocrisy almost made me laugh. For years they mocked me, doubted me, and now they wanted to smooth it all over like none of it had happened. Like they hadn't just accused me of being a criminal 10 minutes earlier. My brother finally managed to force out a chuckle, weak and brittle. "Yeah, sure. Let's forget it. You've got money now, I get it. Good for you, man. Really." The words were meant to sound casual, even generous, but his eyes told the truth, raw resentment burning hotter with every syllable. I could feel the false calm settling over the room, like a fragile glass dome ready to shatter at the slightest touch. For a brief second, I almost let myself believe it, that maybe, just maybe, they'd accept things the way they were. But deep down, I knew better. The uneasy peace lasted less than a day. I should have known. The next evening, my brother showed up at my apartment unannounced. He leaned against the doorway like he owned the place, grinning that familiar grin that always meant trouble. "Look, man," he started, his tone syrupy smooth. "I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday." I didn't invite him in, but he pushed past me anyway, dropping onto my couch like it was his. "I was thinking," he continued, "you've got all this money now, and that's great. Really proud of you. But don't you think it's time to give back? You know, to family." There it was. No hesitation, no shame. Straight to the ask. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. "Give back? You mean bail you out of your bills again?" His grin faltered. "It's not bailing me out. It's helping. That's what family does." I almost laughed. "Funny, I don't remember you helping me when I was eating noodles every night trying to get my business off the ground." His jaw tightened, but he pressed on. "Come on, man. Don't make this ugly. You're doing well, insanely well. You've got a helicopter, for God's sake. I'm not asking for much. Just enough to clear some debts, maybe set me up with a car, pay off a few things. Call it an investment in family harmony." I shook my head slowly. "No." The word seemed to stun him more than the helicopter ever did. His face darkened, and for the first time that night, he dropped the fake charm. "You think you're too good for us now, huh? Too rich to remember where you came from?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Mom. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Her voice was tight, urgent. "You need to listen to your brother. He's right. You've been blessed, and blessings are meant to be shared. You have a responsibility to this family." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "A responsibility?" Where was your sense of responsibility when you let him humiliate me for years? When you accused me of being a criminal instead of believing I'd actually worked for this? There was silence on the other end. Then my dad's voice cut in. He'd taken the phone from her. Listen carefully, he said, calm but cold. We're not asking. We're telling you. This family has needs, and you're in a position to meet them. Refuse, and don't bother coming back here again. I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at it in disbelief before hanging up. My brother was watching me closely, a smirk creeping back across his face. See? It's not just me. They agree. You owe us. I laughed then, a sharp, bitter sound. Oh, you? You mocked me when I had nothing. Now you want a piece of everything I built. That's not family. That's extortion with better manners. His smirk cracked. Careful. You don't want to make enemies out of us. The words hung in the air, ugly and heavy. For years, I'd been treated like the weak one, the easy target. But now I saw it clearly. Their laughter, their dismissals, even their sudden greed, all of it came from fear. Fear that I no longer fit the role they'd written for me. I stood tall, meeting his glare. You've already made yourselves my enemies the moment you decided my success belonged to you. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The apartment was silent again, but my chest was tight. I knew this wasn't the end. They wouldn't let it go. That's when I realized this wasn't just about respect. It was war. After my brother stormed out, silence swallowed the apartment. The walls felt closer, the air heavier, as if even the rooms themselves were waiting to see what I'd do next. I sat at my desk, staring at the same laptop that had once been my lifeline. The screen glowed with numbers, contracts, proof of everything I had built, but for the first time, it didn't feel like power. It felt like a burden. Their voices wouldn't stop echoing in my head. You owe us. Blessings are meant to be shared. Don't make enemies out of us. I ran a hand over my face, exhaustion pressing down. Maybe they were right in a way. Maybe if I just gave them something, a few checks, a car, whatever they wanted, this would all go away. No more phone calls, no more guilt tripping, no more accusations. Just peace. The thought tempted me more than I cared to admit. For years, I'd wanted nothing but their acceptance, their acknowledgement. Maybe paying them off was the price of finally being left alone. But then another memory surfaced, sharper than the rest. I was 16, holding back tears as my brother laughed in front of our cousins, waving the $20 he'd stolen from me and daring me to complain. My parents had shrugged, called it boys being boys, and moved on while I sat there humiliated. That moment had burned itself into me. And now, sitting here decades later, I realized I was on the edge of repeating the same cycle, letting him take from me because it was easier than fighting. I clenched my fists. No, not this time. I thought about everything it had cost me to get here. The nights alone, the failures, the doubt, the loneliness. Every ounce of progress had been carved out of stone with my bare hands. To hand it over now just to buy silence? That would mean admitting they'd been right all along, that I was weak, that I couldn't stand on my own. The anger steadied me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt clarity. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about control. About them keeping me small so they didn't have to face the fact that I'd outgrown them. I took a deep breath, closed the laptop, and sat back. The decision formed in my mind like steel cooling into shape. I wouldn't give them a cent. Not out of fear, not out of guilt, not out of obligation. If they wanted to escalate, let them. I'd meet them head on. The fear was still there, humming beneath my skin, but it no longer dictated my choices. For the first time, I felt like I was steering my own life instead of apologizing for existing. That's when I realized what I had to do to end this once and for all. The showdown happened a week later, though it felt like it had been building for my entire life. My parents invited me over again, but I knew better. It wasn't an invitation. It was an ambush. I could hear it in my dad's clipped tone over the phone, in my mom's forced cheerfulness. They wanted control back. They weren't going to get it. I walked into their house with a folder under my arm. This time I was ready. The living room was staged like a courtroom. My brother sat on one side of the couch, arms crossed, trying to look defiant but twitching with nervous energy. My parents flanked him like lawyers at the ready. The second I entered, the questions started flying. Where exactly did you get this money? My dad demanded. You've been lying to us for years, my mom accused, her voice cracking. My brother leaned forward, smirking. Or maybe you're just scared we'll find out how dirty your little empire really is. I let them vent, let them spit every suspicion, every insult. I didn't interrupt. I wanted them to empty their arsenal first. Then, when the room went quiet, I set the folder on the coffee table and opened it. Inside were the receipts, not just financial ones, but emotional ones too. First came the legal documents. Company registration with my name stamped across it, contracts with corporations they all knew by name, signed and sealed. Then came the tax filings, every page neat and legitimate, dated years back. And finally, the piece de resistance, the old emails, the screenshots, the messages I'd saved. Evidence of how my brother had stolen my early code, tried to pass it off as his, and laughed when my parents praised him for being ambitious. I watched their faces as each page flipped. My mom's eyes widened, my dad's hand froze on his knee, my brother's smirk crumbled into a grimace. You want proof? I said, my voice steady low. Here it is. All of it. Every contract, every check, every ounce of blood I poured into this. Legitimate, clean, undeniable. I slid one email toward my brother, the one where he had bragged to a friend about using my work. And you, don't forget you once tried to steal my future before it even began. I forgave it then. I won't now. His face flushed crimson. That was years ago. It was nothing. It was everything. I cut him off sharply. It was the moment I decided I would never let you define me again. And now you sit here, demanding my success as if it's owed to you? No, that ends tonight. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I turned to my parents. You wanted to know what I owed this family? Here it is, nothing. I don't owe you explanations. I don't owe you money. I don't owe you respect that you never gave me. For years, you mocked me when I had nothing. And now, when I have more than you can imagine, you expect me to hand it over? That's not family. That's greed wearing a mask. My mom's eyes welled with tears. My dad tried to speak, but the words faltered in his throat. My brother sat rigid, fists clenched, trembling with rage. I stood, gathering my folder. I didn't land a helicopter in the yard to impress you. I did it to remind myself I was never small. You just refused to see me. I walked toward the door, my steps slow, deliberate. Behind me, my brother finally shouted, voice cracking with desperation. You'll regret this. You think you're better than us? You're nothing without family. I paused at the doorway, turned my head just enough for him to see my expression, calm, unshaken. No, I'm nothing because of you. I'm everything in spite of you. And then I left. The night air was cool, steady against my skin as I stepped outside. For the first time in years, I felt taller, lighter, unchained. Inside that house, the old hierarchy had crumbled. Whatever came next, it would be on my terms. The antagonist had nothing left to throw, and for once, I had everything.